Have you thought in terms of probabilities about risk? Is that how you think about risk, is in terms of like probabilities and timelines, or?
Of course, but I have to say something important here. This is a case where previous generations of scientists have talked about a notion called the precautionary principle. So what it means is that if you're doing something, say a scientific experiment, and it could turn out really, really bad, like people could die, some catastrophe could happen, then you should not do it. For the same reason, there are experiments that scientists are not doing right now. We're not playing with the atmosphere to try to fix climate change because we might create more harm than actually fixing the problem. We are not creating new forms of life that could, destroy us all, even though it's something that is now conceived by biologists, because the risks are so huge. But in AI, it isn't what's currently happening. We're taking crazy risks. But the important point here is that even if it was only a 1% probability, let's say, just to give a number, even that would be unbearable, would be unacceptable. Like a 1% probability that our world disappears, that humanity disappears, or that a worldwide dictator takes over thanks to AI. These sorts of scenarios are so catastrophic that even if it was 0.1%, it would still be unbearable. And in many polls, for example, of machine learning researchers, the people who are building these things, the numbers are much higher. Like we're talking more like 10% or something of that order, which means we should be just like paying a whole lot more attention to this than we currently are as a society.
There's been lots of predictions over the centuries about how certain technologies or new inventions would cause some kind of existential threat to all of us. So a lot of people would rebuttal the risks here and say this is just another example of change happening and people being uncertain, so they predict the worst and then everybody's fine. Why is that not a valid argument in this case, in your view? Why is that underestimating the potential of AI?
There are two aspects to this. Experts disagree, and they range in their estimates of how likely it's going to be from like tiny to 99%. So that's a very large bracket. So let's say I'm not a scientist and I hear the experts disagree among each other, and some of them say it's like very likely, and some say, well, maybe, it's plausible, 10%, and others say, oh no, it's impossible, or it's so small. Well, what does that mean? It means that we don't have enough information to know what's going to happen, but it is plausible that one of the more pessimistic people in the lot are right, because there is no argument that either side has found to deny the possibility. I don't know of any other existential threat that we could do something about that has these characteristics.
Do you not think at this point we're kind of just the train has left the station? Because when I think about the incentives at play here, when I think about the geopolitical, the domestic incentives, the corporate incentives, the competition at every level, countries racing each other, corporations racing each other, it feels like we're now just going to be a victim of circumstance to some degree.
I think it would be a mistake to let go of our agency while we still have some. I think that there are ways that we can improve our chances. Despair is not going to solve the problem. There are things that can be done. We can work on technical solutions. That's what I'm spending a large fraction of my time. And we can work on policy and public awareness and societal solutions. And that's the other part of what I'm doing, right? Let's say that something catastrophic would happen, and you think there's nothing to be done, but actually there's maybe nothing that we know right now that gives us a guarantee that we can solve the problem. But maybe we can go from 20% chance of catastrophic outcome to 10%. Well, that would be worth it. Anything any one of us can do to move the needle towards greater chances of a good future for our children, we should do.
How should the average person who doesn't work in the industry or isn't in academia in AI think about the advent and invention of this technology? Are there kind of an analogy or metaphor that is equivocal to the profundity of this technology?
So one analogy that people use is we might be creating a new form of life that could be smarter than us, and we're not sure if we'll be able to make sure it doesn't, harm us, that we'll control it. So it would be like creating a new species that could decide to do good things or bad things with us. So that's one analogy, but obviously it's not biological life.
Does that matter?
In my